Hey, you guys, welcome back to Whiteboard Wednesdays. It has been a minute. I am sorry. I have definitely been in the thrust of life lately, managing and balancing all of my responsibilities with, seeing clients in real life, doing my funeral director studies, doing my yoga certification, tending to the real parts of my life, like my partner, my dogs, my family, my friends. So I have been enjoying life for what it is. But I am back and hopefully here to give you some helpful content, especially some content that I think is appropriate in this day and age, in this political climate. So today we are going to be talking about willful ignorance. And so I'm not sure if it's like this for you all, but I know at least for me, getting on social media and seeing anything related to the current political climate pisses me off. Like it really does piss me off. And so for the last few weeks, as I've been unfortunately on threads scrolling, and a lot of my threads is political based and people talking smack about the current political climate. But then it's, seeing the ignorance that exists, and why it makes me so frustrated and angry. And as I was sitting with it over the last few weeks, I came down to this concept of willful ignorance. And so from previous Whiteboard Wednesdays, we have talked about how difficult change can be. And sometimes we don't want to know better, because that would require us to do better. And a lot of the times that is hard. It's not that the opportunity isn't there. It's not that the ability isn't there. A lot of the times it comes back to that willingness or willfulness. And so, obviously we've talked about willingness, which is accepting reality and doing what is needed, even when it's uncomfortable. And so willfulness is the opposite of that. And so when we know better, it requires us to do better. And that might mean facing the truth that disrupts the narrative that we have been clinging so hard to. And so that is how we get into this place of willful ignorance. And so you guys know I'm a definition girly, so I had to put the definition on here. Willful ignorance is the deliberate avoidance of information that contradicts one's beliefs or would require a change in perspective, often to avoid responsibility or the need to act. So that can often sound like, oh, that's just how I am. I'd rather not know that. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather not have this conversation, or I don't want to hear it. We're shutting it down when something might challenge the perspective, belief, thoughts that we hold. When it's okay for people not to have the same beliefs, but for some people, especially those that might operate in willful ignorance, when someone does have a perspective that is different than theirs, it automatically is an attack. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. But like I said, willful ignorance and willfulness is the opposite of willingness. And so willfulness is literally resisting reality and refusing to act or trying to force change that is not possible. And so willingness requires, and involves being open and being flexible and adaptable. Whereas oftentimes people who operate from a place of willfulness are seen as stubborn or rigid, and often an emotional stance that is opposite of doing what works. And so when we think of people that are willfully ignorant, it's not that the information is not there. And we see that especially in the political climate. This topic about autism and vaccines has really had me chuckling, because, it's been so much research on these things. And yet you have people out here literally saying that research does not exist. And so it's not that the information is not there. It's just that we have, and certain people have made intentional decisions to ignore it. And I don't think this truly, it does not only exist in this bubble of political. This is in every aspect. This can be in your romantic life, your friendship relationships, your work. It could be in your familial relationships. It could be, willful ignorance with yourself of, I know I need to be doing these things, but I don't want to do them because I can't be this person anymore if I take in this information and really sit with it and try to incorporate it in my life. Like, I will no longer be the same. It reminds me a lot of my journey in grad school, where I was ignorant to a lot of the things that I'm aware of now, and so being introduced to those things, I had a choice to make. I can incorporate this and integrate this into my new narrative and my new truth, or I could reject it, reject it, reject it. Oh no, like my way, is the only way, and all these things that you guys are telling me that I need to do, no way. I'm not going to do those things because I know what works. Even though like the information is there that these things that they're teaching me works. And so once I learned this information, there was no way for me not to do different with that information, because I had to integrate it, incorporate it, and digest it, and recognize that the things that I had believed in my 22 years of living up into the point I got into grad school, a lot of that was not real, and it was not true, and it was not the only truth, maybe, And so I had to be open and willing to accept this new information. And I'm gonna tell y'all, I was very overwhelmed by all the information that I got in grad school. Like, sleep was really my friend and I feel like that's where the integration part happened, is when I got to turn my brain off and really sit and not interfere with all the things that I have been taught and learned. And so all that to say, some people intentionally ignore the truth and avoid the truth because they just don't want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is really it. But some other reasons why we might avoid the truth could be, it could force us to change. It could make us accountable. It would disrupt the version of the story where we're always the one that's right. It would require unlearning what we've normalized, even if it's unhealthy. And it would force us to feel and sit with emotions we've avoided for years, or maybe we've never felt before. And so ultimately, like, all of these things happen because the truth is uncomfortable. We hear the truth hurts, or that's a hard truth. We hear all these things about how the truth can be hard and hurtful and impactful and can be transformative, but I don't think we actually truly recognize, like, the truth is not easy to accept. The truth can be uncomfortable, especially if your perspective does not align with the truth. And so oftentimes it's that feeling of discomfort that is really, really hard for people to sit with. And so we just continue to avoid it. And not be accountable, not try to change. We refuse to unlearn the things that we have normalized and made we've normalized in our lives and in our society, because we don't want to do that. That takes too much time. That's a lot of work, and we're lazy nowadays. We want quick fixes. We want solutions fast, and not everything comes with a solution. Sometimes that is the solution, is that this is going to be a journey. This is the hard work. And so essentially, we have to acknowledge the truth. We cannot continue to pretend that things are fine. We cannot continue to pretend that it's just going to go away if we ignore it. We can't keep blaming everyone else. We can't keep living in the version of the story that lets us off the hook and keeps us safe. And we'll talk a little bit about that comfort zone and that safety in a couple of slides. And so we know reality as it is exists, but how does one operating from willful ignorance impact reality? And so this can look like you start interpreting facts as attacks. So, we have seen, especially again in this political climate, where reporters and the public, and there have been all these people that have presented these facts, and yet, we all of a sudden we present these facts and it's the Democrats' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. We're placing blame on other people for one, and we feel like it's an attack instead of just taking responsibility of, like, this is actually what it is right now. You see new information as disrespect, not opportunity. You defend your beliefs even when they're hurting you. You rewrite stories to protect your ego, not the truth. So again, this is very much manipulating the narrative and controlling the narrative to fit this version of you. Sorry, guys, Bebe is excited. This version of you that you are holding on so dear to, that is like resisting reality. It's very manipulative. It's very controlling. It's very, this is how it has to be. You cannot disagree with me. And that's just not life. Like, I do not agree with every single person on every single thing, but everyone is also entitled to their own opinion, and I respect that. And a lot of the times that opinion has nothing to do with me. And so willful ignorance can block growth. It can keep you in cycles, and it keeps you emotionally, it keeps your emotional reality misaligned with actual reality. So a lot of this is based on the emotional mind that we've talked about before. So, our rational mind is the truth. It's facts. 2 + 2 is 4, right? But if we allow our emotional mind to say, no, 2 + 2 is 5, like, I think there has been a conversation where people were like, no, like 0 times 1 is, it was a mess. But I say all that to say, like, if we allow our emotional mind to come in and color the things, we're not going to see the truth for the actual reality. And now we have this distorted truth. We have this truth through rose-colored lenses, as people might say. And so it holds us hostage to, like I said, those old narratives, those generational cycles, these false identities, and the flat out misinformation. You think about this in people, in families of abuse, where we know something is happening, but we don't tell outsiders. We keep that in the family. We don't repeat this. This is a secret. We do all of those things, and we play willful ignorant, because if somebody calls us out on that, we have to now be held accountable for what actually happened under the roof that it happened under. And so it keeps us emotionally mature. It keeps us relationally stuck, and disconnected from reality. Reality does not change. You change. You know what I'm saying? We can, baby, if we could all alter the reality that we wanted, you know what I'm saying? Like, it would have been done, but we cannot do that. All you can do, once again, is control who you are, what you do, what you say, how you interact with that reality. And so ultimately, like, once you know better, you are responsible for what you do with that knowledge. And that is where the choice comes in. You can choose to integrate it and operate from a place of willingness, or you can stay in that willfulness and be willfully ignorant. But that is where the truth lies once that information is there. And that's why I'm so big on choices and people having information. We oftentimes I hear like, oh, I don't want to ask that question because things will change. So you want to stay in this gray area limbo that often that is very uncomfortable for a lot of us, because we don't want to have to do something with that new knowledge. But asking that question could get us clarity so we can make a better decision instead of staying in this gray area and assuming what we think we should do and then that be the wrong thing. And so that is where our choice lies, is what do we do with this knowledge now? And so what does it sound like when someone might accept reality, or when someone is working to accept reality? This can sound like, this is hard to hear, but I'm open to learning. This might sound like, I never saw it this way before. This might sound like, I used to believe that, but I know better now, or I'm working on figuring out like what this means for me, or I don't like how this feels, but that does not make it untrue. That is growth, that is maturity, that is freedom. And so I wanted to put this comfort zone because a lot of us love this comfort zone. And this is one of my favorite figures. Again, I learned a lot when I came into the field as a professional. And like, I have a sticky on my computer of the comfort zone, the fear zone, learning zone, growth zone, because it's so easy to stay in our comfort zone. It's so easy to stay safe because safety is stable, safety is secure. But what happens when we outgrow that and we have all of this new knowledge, but we're so stuck in being safe that we have no way to incorporate that? And so that is oftentimes where we have to step into that fear zone, and be open and willing to the unknown, of, I don't know what this means for me quite yet. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's expecting you to have an answer there, but you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone into that fear zone, and then ultimately the learning and the growth zone. And so sometimes all people can choose is willful ignorance in the phase of life that they're in, because who they are, because who are they if everything that they have deemed to be true is no longer true? You know what I'm saying? If that safety, if that comfortability, if that security is snatched away, what do I do? I'm now in this unsafe world where I don't know how to feel. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think. You know what I'm saying? And so for some of us, that is easier to step into than others, because we know that there's growth on the other side, likely. But for a lot of us, staying in that comfort zone, we are not willing to sacrifice um, learning new knowledge and being better than who we are now, because that safety, that security, that stability, that comfort um is all we know, and our nervous system is literally thrown to shambles the moment we step into fear. um and so it's important to know that growth requires awareness and accountability. So you can be aware, you know what I'm saying? We can be aware all we want to, but we have to integrate that and hold ourselves accountable to those things. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it on my social media, but my conceptualization of change and what I see in therapy are my little stop sign color, or my little stoplight colors. So red is the awareness. First, we have to stop and be aware of what's happening. Then the yellow is the acceptance piece of like, okay, like I accept the reality for what it is. I accept the fact that I did not know this before, and I don't I was misconstrued. I misunderstood it before. And now I'm in a place of trying to figure out what this looks like for me now based on the truth that is in front of me, right? And then we have that action. How do we incorporate these new truths and new narratives and new perspectives into our day-to-day life and how we hope to operate and engage and show up in the world? And so that's how I conceptualize change. And I think that is a direct view of coming out of that comfort zone into the growth zone. And so I think a question that is important to sit with is, what am I afraid will change if I accept this is true? If I accept that this person has told me they don't want to be in a relationship, what does that mean for me? That means I have to give up all of these hopes and dreams that I had, of being with that person. That means, I have to remain single in this world that is pressuring me to have a partner right now. That means, I that might push your timeline back a little bit, because you had this expectation, I need to be dating for this amount of time before we get married, and all, it might push the timeline back a little bit. And so having to accept all of that and navigate when maybe you dedicated a lot of your time, your energy, your effort into that relationship or into that thing, um it's gonna hurt, and it's gonna feel very uncomfortable to step away from that and see what different will look like by accepting that truth. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes we can't change truths for other people. Sometimes they are not in a place of having the willingness to change, right? They might have the ability, they might have the opportunity, but they might not have the willingness right now, or they might not have any of those dimensions to be able to effectively change. So what am I afraid will change if I accept this is true? That might mean you're going to have to let go of this narrative that you have always had about yourself. That might mean you have to get rid of this image and story that you have created for yourself, based on what you knew at that moment. And now that you have this truth, you have to rebuild. Okay, what does my story, what does my journey look like now that I know these things? And so, and if someone it might not be you, someone in your life is operating out of willful ignorance, know that you cannot force them into becoming aware or accountable, and willing to accept the truth. You cannot control them integrating the truth into their narrative. You can control, however, is how you choose to interact and engage with someone who is operating and choosing willful ignorance at this time. So for me, that is, I have to get off of threads sometimes, because I cannot stand to see certain individuals get airtime. Because it's frustrating, because I know that this is not the truth, but here you guys are manipulating, controlling the narrative, so that means I can't engage with political conversations. I know that if I need some clarity, I'm just going to ask the question, because that way I can make the best decision based on all of the information, not just a piece of the information that serves my narrative, serves my point. I can choose to say something or not say something. If someone says this is my opinion and I'm like, okay, I don't have to engage in that conversation. I can let that person have their own perspective and still be secure in my own truth, to not feel like I need to debate or give them the truth, because they might not be ready for that. So remember that, you always have a choice in how you engage. We cannot choose other people. We cannot control other people, especially when they're operating out of a place of willful ignorance. I know that was loaded. I gave y'all a little bit of my personal opinions in this one, because, I try to be as open and honest as truthful with you guys, because I'm affected by the stuff too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I always like to tell my clients, I am no better than y'all. Stuff that y'all struggle with, I be struggling with too. That's why I have my own therapist, but I have that space, and I have the ability to compartmentalize, to allow my stuff not to show up in the room with you guys. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't impact me. It doesn't mean that it doesn't piss me off, as it might you guys too. So I hope this information was helpful for someone today, and I will see you guys in the next Whiteboard Wednesday. Bye.